I'm happy to introduce my friend and the chair of Venture Madness, Diana Vowels. Good to see you, Diana.
Thank you, Kate. I'm happy to be here, and I'm really excited today to talk about Venture Madness this year, what's going on, and how you can compete. And I'm really looking forward to seeing a lot of the top startups in our community submit applications. So with me today, I have Karen Katzorke, and she is our Executive Director of Invest Southwest Venture Madness. Give them a wave, Karen. And we have Sydnie Keddington, and Sydnie Keddington is with Kickstart Fund, and she is joining us today from Utah, probably. Give them a wave, Sydnie. Glad to have you. And so I'm going to give you a high-level overview of what Venture Madness is, if you haven't been involved in the past. And then Sydnie is going to talk about what investors look for in the pitches. And then Karen's going to round us out with the nuts and bolts of how you apply. So if we are ready to go, I will have Karen start the slides. Oh, good. Our number of participants keeps climbing. People must be interested in this session. So, what is Venture Madness and Invest Southwest? We're going to talk today about getting your game face on and how to apply for Venture Madness, and hopefully give you some tips of how to be successful in the competition. So we want to first of all thank our partners. Our top level sponsors are Arizona Commerce Authority, PHX Ventures, Galvanize, Greater Phoenix Economic Council, GPEC, and Osborne Maladon. So big thank you to our sponsors. Without them, this couldn't be possible. As I mentioned, I am Diana Vowels. I am the chair of Invest Southwest. We've got Sydnie Keddington with us with Kickstart, and Karen. All right, so we have moved Venture Madness this year. Typically, if you've attended Venture Madness in the past, it's been a springtime event in February or March. Because of the pandemic, we have pushed back to October, and we are pleased to tell you that it will be a hybrid event. So there will be live components of the event, and there will also be the opportunity for people to join in from home. So first of all, we want to show you our highlight reel of the past events.
To the founders and co-founders, for having the vision, vigor, and confidence it takes to birth a new idea. For being bold, audacious, and determined, despite the setbacks, obstacles, and the naysayers. For daring to do what others said you shouldn't, you couldn't, or wouldn't. Your presence here tonight proves that they were wrong, and that you should, that you could, and that you will. It is because of you, entrepreneurs, we are here tonight. So tonight, startups will drink to you. Cheers!
Excellent. Listening to that music and seeing those pitches reminds me of the fantastic competitions we've had in the past years. And this would be a good time for me to plug the next session following this one, where we're going to talk to some of the past winners of Venture Madness, and they're going to tell you what they've done with their companies since then. So, but first of all, what is Invest Southwest? We are a nonprofit dedicated to connecting investors with the region's most promising ventures. We were established in 1992, so we've been around for a while. We are the longest running capital conference in Arizona. We've had several different names before we were Venture Madness. We were Arizona Venture Capital Conference and Invest Southwest Capital Conference. We've been Venture Madness since 2014, and we are organized and managed by a board of 9 board members. We're a volunteer-based organization, and Karen is the continuity who keeps us all together year after year. She's been with the organization for many years, and she does an amazing job. The impact of Venture Madness. So the companies that have competed, have presented, have raised more than $1 billion. and approximately 40% of the companies who've participated have received funding. So those are pretty good stats, given how hard it is to secure funding. We have investor participation from multiple sources. We typically have about 250 to 300 people in attendance, and we hope to be at that same number this year. Yet to be determined how many of those will be in person versus online, but we are looking forward to a great event. One of the most important things about Venture Madness is the networking. You get to network with regional investors, with angel investors, institutional investors, and oh, by the way, there's also cash prizes. We give giant checks, so that's kind of fun. Now, about Venture Madness, this is our signature event. So Invest Southwest puts on this signature event every year. We typically have 24 to 36 of the region's most promising ventures who are competing. They're grouped into various categories. So we have different competition categories like SaaS, hardware, deep tech, etc. So if you enter, you'll be moved into one of the categories to compete with similar businesses in that category. And it is our signature event. And as far as the timeline, good news here. Good news with the timing of Phoenix Startup Week and Venture Madness is we have opened the application window, and we've got, can you go to the next slide, Karen? Our application window is open April 8th through June 3rd. So you're right in the middle of the window, and our presenting companies will be announced August 6th. So the presenting companies will then, that's when we narrow it down to our 24 to 36 companies who are presenting. Those companies will go through an orientation, a kickoff reception, mentoring, and the hybrid event in October. One thing I'll mention here is that we are, this is exclusive access to angel and VC investors. So this isn't just an event that's open to the public. There's a kickoff reception that's scheduled for October 6th and the general session October 7th. This year, we are going to be hosting the events in downtown Phoenix at the Phoenix Biomedical Campus, which has done some amazing things during the pandemic. So we've got a cool new venue that we're going to be showing off. It's an invitation-only networking opportunity. So it's a chance for entrepreneurs and founders to rub elbows with investors. And we are doing our event this year in partnership with AZ Bio Week and the Unmet Conference. So that week of October, mark your calendars because Phoenix is going to be rocking. We are going to start off the week with AZ Bio Week, then we're going to lead into Venture Madness, and then we're going to lead into the Unmet Conference. So if ever there was a week for investors to be in Arizona, to be in Phoenix, looking at startups, it is the week of October 3rd. So should be really exciting. And the program formatting is updated. We're going to have discussion time between the presentations and really give founders the opportunity to talk to investors. We have an exciting new keynote speaker that we will be announcing any day now. As soon as, well, they give us the official word that we can start promoting it, but we have a great keynote speaker lined up. And we've streamlined the application format for early stage and growth firms that are interested in applying. Karen's going to talk a little bit about the details here in a few minutes on that. We have new regional investors who are attending, and of course, cash prizes. So we all want the cash prizes. Next slide, Karen. Okay, schedule of events. So I mentioned it's going to be downtown Phoenix at the Phoenix Biomedical Campus, kicking off the reception October 6th, and then October 7th. The format is that it runs from about 8 to 5 and then a reception at the end, but we'll have a check-in breakfast. Different categories are competing at the same time. So there's different tracks running, a networking lunch and keynote. And then we go into the afternoon competition. We announce the winners, and we're going to have a networking reception that will be in partnership with the Unmet Conference. So again, a great opportunity for investors who are thinking about coming into the market to be able to hit 2 events at once, and an even better opportunity for the entrepreneurs who will have the opportunity to meet those investors. This is some feedback from the past of how people felt about Venture Madness. It's been an amazing event. We generally get very high marks on it, and we're excited to put this year's conference on. Okay, so what's in it for the startup? As I mentioned, networking, unparalleled networking, meeting mentors, other entrepreneurs, accredited investors. The expert mentorship The mentoring program is the one thing that our past winners, and you'll probably hear this in the next session, that our past winners have talked about what has made a difference in this conference versus other competitions they've gone through. The mentoring they get before the presentations and the connections that they make during that mentoring have often led to business relationships, investments, helping them find talent, and building champions and fans in the community. You're allowed to bring your pitch to perfection through our process, and awareness and publicity. We provide media, investor and mentor exposure throughout the process. Even if you don't make it to the final round, being associated with Venture Madness can be a very good thing for your company. Okay, so at this point, I will turn it over to the lovely Sydnie, who everyone will want to hear from because she's going to talk about what investors are looking for in this competition. Take it away, Sydnie.
Hi, everybody. Great to meet you all virtually. And thrilled to see the turnout. I think this is fantastic to see so much interest, and really definitely hope you will all apply for Venture Madness and attend. I think that Diana just gave a great overview of what the benefits are of being involved, and it's a fantastic event. Kind of quick context and overview of me and of Kickstart. So we've been, longtime supporters of Invest Southwest and Venture Madness. We're thrilled to be partnered, and absolutely love being part of this event. As for me, I've been in VC for over 4 years now, full-time for just over 2. I kind of quick backstory, started working in VC as a member of our student fund. So we have a student fund that invests solely in students, was involved with that for a couple of years, when I worked in management consulting, and then joined Kickstart full-time, and absolutely love venture. So I kind of mentioned that briefly in case there are any students in the audience. Please check out Campus Founders Fund. It's a great resource for student-led companies, and something you should definitely check out. But a quick overview of Kickstart. We're based in Salt Lake City. We absolutely love Arizona. We're investors in a few companies that folks on the call might be familiar with, including eVisit, Homey, a couple more recent investments out of Fund 5 are Quick and Scola, which is a company of which I sit on the board for. And that's kind of us in a nutshell. I guess, quick highlight, we focus on the seed stage and are really kind of focused on businesses in the Mountain West region. So if you are raising capital and you'd like to reach out, I'll include my email at the end here and would love to connect with you. So do you mind just shifting to the next slide? So I want to kind of, I built out a few slides to give an overview of a few things. One in particular, I think and where I'd love to start, is just giving a sense for how VCs view the world. I think that this is really valuable perspective for a founder to adopt and have going into these conversations. Each investment firm will differ a bit in what they look for as far as the specifics are concerned. And so I would just say, take everything I'm saying with a grain of salt and understand that some of this is influenced specifically by what Kickstart looks for, but I think there are a lot of overlapping patterns generally that you'll see. And I think that really the key should be, I would encourage you to have lots of conversations with founders, do your homework on the investment groups that you're meeting with in particular, and really understand kind of how they view the world. The other thing I'll say quickly, just as a high level, is obviously this is within the context of Venture Madness. And so I'd love to spend a little bit of time, again, talking about the VC paradigm, but also kind of what to expect in terms of how to think about framing your pitch in a kind of speed pitch format. Because that's a much different story than having a 30 to 45 minute conversation with investors. And it's actually really challenging in certain ways. And so I have some ideas to share on how you could be thinking about that. And then we'll double click into a couple of those in terms of meeting with investors. But I want to make sure that we really appreciate, for the sake of preparing for this event in particular, how you can kind of be thinking. And then, of course, where you'll be spending the bulk of your time from a fundraising perspective, beyond events, is these more in-depth conversations with investors. So I want to make sure we're hitting on that as well. And then, I think we'll have a couple minutes for Q&A at the end. And so feel free to field your questions. I think there's a chat window, or hopefully that's, I think there's a chat somewhere. So include your questions in the chat. Those will be fielded toward the end. The reason that I think it's so important to understand the world that VCs operate in, there are a few reasons. One, I think your message will be naturally more targeted toward what the investor is interested in learning and understanding about your business. We don't expect we don't expect you to know everything we know about venture, obviously, just as of course, you don't expect us to know everything about that you know about your space. You're the expert on your business, but we do want to see that you have a baseline understanding, as this has implications on your ability to build a syndicate and raise money in the future. The other thing I would say, and kind of probably the most important point, is doing this, really kind of getting into the heads of your investors, builds and helps you to build a foundation of trust. If we can speak each other's language in these conversations, there's less open for interpretation. There are fewer surprises when we start to negotiate, and we sort of know what to expect. And this just saves time and headache for everybody across the board. So I don't want to belabor the point, but I think it's just worth mentioning. And the last thing I'll say on this is read Venture Deals. Many of you have probably heard of this book. It's a book written by Brad Felt and Jason Mendelson from Foundry Group in Colorado. And the idea is really to water down these complex principles that exist within the world of VC. Because the reality is, if you're brand new to VC, it can be overwhelming and daunting. And there's a whole new language that you're learning and so many nuances. And so they wrote this book to say, hey, let's create some parity between the conversations that are occurring between investors and founders. And it's really geared toward the founders to say, this is how investors view the world. And here's how we can simplify what is maybe initially this really kind of mysterious realm, and making it much less intimidating. So I would really recommend reading Venture Deals, and I include that on a slide later on with a series of other resources. So just know that as you go into these conversations, we're seeing dozens, if not more, pitch meetings every week. And what that means for you, needless to say, is it's competitive, right? There's a lot of opportunities that most investors you're meeting with are weighing against what they're seeing in their conversation with you. And moreover, there's a lot of context shifting that's occurring. And I'll talk about this a little bit more later as well, but understand that as you go to this conversation, simplicity is key, and keeping things high level, and really focusing on what are the main points that I should be hitting on. If there are 2 or 3 things that I want this audience to take away from this conversation, what are those things? And ideally those things are points, obviously, that will lead that audience to want to learn more and have a follow-up conversation and go into the diligence process. And so that's kind of how I think you want to be thinking about this. The next thing I'd kind of touch on is actually what I'd say here. So I have a point on 10x our money, dragons and unicorns. These are phrases and terms you all might be familiar with. But seeking venture dollars is not the route for all businesses, and in fact is not the route that most businesses should take, just candidly speaking, in aggregate, if you're looking at businesses. And the reason I say that is it's a very specific model that aligns with a niche group of companies, and obviously startups, that can kind of vary in terms of what are your goals, what space are you playing in, what's the market opportunity. If you're running a lifestyle business, venture is probably not the path for you. And there might be other investment avenues or capital resources, but understand that there are trade-offs that occur. And I obviously want to echo or emphasize that partnering with an investment group, and the right investment group, opens you up to a world of opportunities and resources. You have well-experienced, very smart people around the table to help keep you accountable. You have thought partners. You're tapping into these individuals' networks, which includes investors and founders. And I see a company coming in here. What kind of company is venture right for? And so I think that the point is, and that's a good question. It's not easy to answer in a very specific way. And so let me kind of see if I can add a little more color. But essentially, you want to be recognizing that it's an incredible avenue. There's so many resources that you'll have opened up to you, but you are giving away some element of control of your company, and you're giving away equity. And that's something you want to be really thoughtful around. And I think the most important thing is, if you decide that this is the right path for you, be really thoughtful about the partners that you're selecting, because this is a long-term relationship. You want to be working with individuals whose values are aligned with you, who will be patient through the journey, and obviously who, again, will hold you accountable and have high expectations for the outcome of the business, but who will also be really kind of in this journey for the good and for the bad, because it's not all it's not all good. There's going to be moments where things are going to get challenging and difficult decisions will have to be made, and you want to be partnered with a group that you feel like you can trust, that trusts you. And so, there's a bunch of different ways I can answer the question around what kind of company is venture right for. Obviously, when we invest, and this will kind of jump into kind of these next 2 points, which is we want to at least 10x our money, and we want to invest in companies that we can see the potential for being what we call dragons and unicorns. Dragons being fund returners, so companies that can return the entire fund that we're investing out of, or unicorns, which are companies that are valued at $1 billion. And the reason I say that is the success rate of companies and startups especially in the earlier stages is not high. It's actually very low. And so every single time we invest in a company, we have to conceptualize the possibility of that company being one that is capable of achieving an outcome like this, to essentially, and just putting it bluntly, make up for the failures. And so we absolutely, when we view the world of venture, we look at these, and I think it's really important as an investor to strike a balance between what can go right and what could go wrong. And everybody, I think, kind of falls in a different end of the spectrum as far as that's concerned. But I think that what's important for you as a founder to understand is this is what investors are aiming for. And if this is how you view the trajectory of your business, this could be a good path for you. Again, if you're building a lifestyle business where you're going, I want to make a few $1 million at the end of this, and, or a couple million or a few $100,000, that's fantastic. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Just understand who you might be better partnered with in the grander scheme of things. So I hope that kind of answers that a bit. Yeah, absolutely. And then I think the last thing I'd say on this slide is ultimately we're betting on the jockey, not the horse. This is a phrase you'll hear. And what this means is we're betting on you as the founder. We want to see, there's so much that we'll go into from a diligence perspective. There's a lot of questions we'll have in the business. And of course we care about all of that. But at the end of the day, the chances of your current vision for the company today being, exactly the same a year, 3 years, 5 years down the road are pretty slim. You're going to pivot, and we want to be investing in individuals who we really believe are capable of making these decisions in a way where again, you can build and scale this business to a degree where we are where we're having a successful outcome. And so I think that that's just an important thing for you to understand, is we care a lot about who you are and who your team is. Next slide, Karen. So I'm actually going to skip to the slide after this, and then I'll cover this one after. Yep. So for the speed pitch, just kind of want to go into a few of these components. Again, this is challenging when you have only a few minutes to articulate. You want to address the questions that your audience is going to have while keeping it super high level. And it's difficult to strike this balance. It just is. And so I think that the key to kind of take away here is spend a lot of time thinking about what are the most important takeaways in this short limited time that I have. Practice your pitch over and over with people who are far removed from the work that you do. I think that that's really important. If you're practicing your pitch, and oh yeah, good point. Yeah. So yes, thank you for saying that. Somebody said, cannot make an ask in our conference. And that is true. So, don't make your ask in the venture madness component or portion. But so what I was saying is make sure that you're practicing in front of folks who don't understand the space that you're in, because you want to be, again, getting in the heads. I think that the North Star should really be empathizing with your audience, thinking about this from the perspective of somebody who knows nothing about this, and that's hard to do because you're in this all day long, and I think it's hard to kind of take that position and zoom out. And so sometimes it's important, I think, to have other people help you to do that. And so what I'll say here is, these are a few things that kind of come to mind. This is going to vary a little bit to some extent for each company. And so you have to be really thoughtful about, okay, what space are you playing in? What's your unique business model? And what points do I need to be making? But I think it's pretty safe to say that these first 4 points are, these are going to be what investors 100% of the time are going to want to know, among other things. So make sure you hit on these 4 things. What's the problem that you're aiming to solve? How are you solving that problem? How are you making money? And what's your traction to date? there are other things that I'll go into if we jump to the slide above, and I'm just going to double click into a couple of these things. So 2 slides back now. Sorry, I know it's confusing. I messed up the order of these. So let me just spend a couple minutes double clicking into these. And I think that some of what I'll say here will be applicable for the context of Venture Madness, and most of it will be applicable for the context of pitching in an investment meeting where you have more time to actually have a conversation. So point being, take what you think applies to you for a speed pitch, and go from there. So, point number 1, what is the problem you're aiming to solve? We want to understand, is this something that is, a lot of times we'll talk internally about, is this a pain pill or a vitamin? Is this something, how critical is the solution that you've built to the pain, and how severe is the pain that you're addressing? And I know that that's kind of a broad statement, but just a few things to be thinking about from our perspective in terms of how are we evaluating how important this, this thing that you're building really is in the grand scheme of things. And then of course, how are you solving the problem? So what is your product? We obviously want to know what you're doing. And I think it's just super important, again, to keep this high level, especially if you're building something that's highly technical. We want to just understand the kind of moral of the story, what's the high level. And if we have questions on the details, we'll ask them. What differentiates your solution from others? So, there's more I can say on this, and I'll go into this a little bit more depending on how much time we have, but just of course, understanding what unique insight have you obtained that really poises you to win in this category? How do you generate revenue? So, what is your monetization strategy? Let's talk about this for a second in terms of pre-seed and seed stage, because I think that this is something that, a lot of times I get questions of what revenue do you want to see? What metrics and KPIs do you want to see at your stage? And, one of my simultaneously least favorite and favorite parts about working in early, pre-seed and seed stage venture is that there's no data to go off of half the time. And it's like, we're very limited in the numbers we can reference because this is so early. And it's oftentimes we're looking at businesses that have existed for less than, shorter than a year. And so that's always a challenging question to ask. And there's so much, intuition and pattern recognition that goes into this business that I can give kind of high level ballpark numbers that we tend to see, but it's only, useful to an extent, because the other thing is this varies so much from one business to the next at this stage. And what I mean by that is just a few examples. If you're building a consumer app, you're probably focused first and foremost on users and engagement. If you're building an enterprise SaaS solution, maybe you're starting with proof of concepts or pilots. If you're building a marketplace, maybe you're focused first on proving out the concept in one specific geography and keeping a narrow and iterative focus. And, monetization is something that's going to be a secondary focus for you as you continue to build out that kind of supply and demand side. So I just share that to say, very high level at the seed stage, I can tell you, we love to see revenue. I think it's a great indication of product market fit. Call it 20 to 30K MRR, great signal. That is absolutely not a hard and fast rule. That's something that I think, we can, it again, just varies so much from business to business. And I think that the bigger thing is what data points can you pull from? It doesn't have to be revenue. What data points can you highlight that are just demonstrating, hey, people want this, people are biting, and this is important. And we've demonstrated that this is going to ultimately be revenue generating in the future with XYZ points. And so do be data centric and be quantitative as often as you can. I definitely don't want to overshadow that. I think that's critical actually, but just don't, some businesses, the revenue component is going to be really important at this stage, some less so. And I would just say, at the end of the day, obviously, what are your revenue streams? And so, is the money transaction based? Is it subscription based, commission based? Is there a cyclicality or seasonality component? Of course, we want to see recurring revenue. So if your revenue is not recurring, I think it's worth kind of tapping into that for a minute and just explaining kind of, speaking to that, because that's something that most investors are going to ask. And but just a few kind of, I'm spitballing a little bit, but these are some things to be thinking about in the business model. How will you reach your customers? So what's your go-to-market strategy? How are you reaching your audience, who obviously is your target audience in the first place? How are you kind of categorizing and segmenting the people that you are going to ultimately be catering to? What's your current traction? So I spent a lot of time talking about the business model. this can mean so many different things. It's revenue, it's KPIs, it's the current state of your product. Are you at MVP? Is your product fully functioning? Is it deployed? Is it being utilized by customers right now? So understanding that, how many customers you have, et cetera, and then what makes you and your team poised to succeed. So this is, to my point earlier on betting on the jockey, not the horse. What is the composition of your team? Who are you? What are your backgrounds? Are you subject matter experts? And what is your why will you be the team to win in this space? And then finally, what is your ask? And this is very important for these investor conversations. Again, appreciate somebody calling that out on the previous slide. But I think that this one is important, and I'm just going to make one quick comment on this. Did I start at about 2:15? Would you say, Diana? I just want to keep track of time. Should I be ending around 35, 40?
I think you've got about 5 more minutes.
Okay. So
you've got 10 more minutes, and then we'll move to Q&A. 10 more.
Perfect. Okay, that's great. Okay, so in that case, I'll spend a quick second talking about the ask. So this is, and we could talk about this for hours. I think that just one high level comment I'll make here is this sets a precedent. I think there's a couple things to be thinking about. One is, how much capital are you raising, and what is it? We always want to know, what does that get you from a runway perspective? What are you, and what milestones are you aiming to hit with that capital? And what are your use of funds? A lot of this goes without saying, but I think it's really important that you're thinking about and being really thoughtful about, hey, we need $1 million, $2 million, whatever the case is. And these are the justifications for why we need that much capital. The reason I say that is capital efficiency is, I think, a super important thing to be cognizant of. A phrase that I love is constraint fosters creativity. And I think that this can be underappreciated, but if you have challenging decisions to be making and you're in the early phases of your business, and you have $5 million in the bank, that tends, no matter how disciplined of a person you are, no matter how thoughtful you are about these decisions that you're making, that does change the way you're going to view the decisions that you're making. And so I think not only is it a great discipline as a founder to be iterative in your fundraise and in every element of your business, but also as a signal to investors that you are capable of doing a lot with a little. And I think when we see founders who are saying, maybe 500K is the right number for you, maybe it's 700K, maybe it's $1.5 million, whatever the number is, just be prepared to speak to that. And not only speak to that, but be prepared to really internalize that for yourself. Because again, you just want to know, what does this mean? What am I really going to be doing with this capital? And it's a fine line, because you also don't want to raise too little, because you don't want to be kind of in this no man's land at the end of 6 months. And so raise enough, but don't raise more than you need. And then the other thing I would just add is, be careful with your equity, obviously. But also set a price when you're talking valuation and negotiating with investors that won't pigeonhole you to unattainable expectations for your subsequent round. And I think that it's always a hard comment to make as an investor, because it feels like, obviously we have a bias, we're sitting on different sides of the table, and there's kind of always going to be this mutually disagreeable point where we land. And I'm just being totally candid with everybody on the call, because I think this is just an important thing for people to be thinking about, which is, fundamentally, I think just a lot of founders underappreciate the fact that you want a healthy uptick on your next round. And there are milestones that you'll need to hit between close of this round and the next round to justify that. I'd say healthy uptick, give or take around 2.5x of what you're currently at. And worst case scenario, you're stuck with a down round. And that's a tough signal where, and it's not that something you can't recover from, but it is going to make raising subsequent rounds challenging. So that's just a word of caution on valuation in particular, is just be thoughtful around what you're asking for. There are nuances that I think can be easy to miss or underappreciate. Okay, so that's a high level kind of on all of this. So much more I could say, but hopefully that's helpful. And then one slide over. Yep, perfect. Okay, these are sort of this was a brainstorm, but I think that these are some of the first things that come to mind. I just wanted to kind of end with a few tips, do's and don'ts. So this first one is funny, and it's not that huge of a deal, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. But for some reason, every time a founder comes in with 5 people, it's just overwhelming and distracting, I think, for the investment group. And it happens, like, I shouldn't say it happens often, but whenever it happens, it's just one of those things that I just go, I wish that somebody could have let them know that this is, and it's not like we see that and go, we're not investing in the company. It's not, that's not the case by any means, but I think it just sends a signal that maybe, there's less sophistication or it's just distracting. So just keep that in mind. I think, 2, maybe 3 people in the room is a healthy place to be, but much more than that, and you're going to be kind of, I think, it just won't be, it's not ideal. Don't not leave time for Q&A. So, time your pitch before you, like, keep an eye on the clock, understand how much time has been set aside for this conversation ahead of time, and leave plenty of time for these investors to ask questions, because you want them to be, finding out the information that they want to know, which will ultimately, ideally, lead to a diligence process. Don't display an outrageous hockey stick slide. I mean, the reality is everybody does this. And so I think that the point is really being able to speak to, founders and investors all know that like at this stage, projections are projections, and it only means so much. But the point is, we do want to see how you're thinking about it. And we want to see that you have thought about this in a, I think, realistic and attainable way, because I think it just sets a precedent for how you'll be making decisions moving forward. Be careful with your cap table. I'm going to fly through the rest of these quickly because I'm looking at the clock here, but be careful with your cap table. I hate when this happens, but there are moments where we are really interested in the company and the cap table is just so messy and decisions have been made in the early days where it's too much to work through, and it's a non-starter for us. And so, and I will say, if you're in a position and you're listening to this call and you're going, does that apply to me? It's not always a deal breaker. There are ways to clean up your cap table. There are always ways to clean up your cap table, but just recognize that you should be really thoughtful about how you're allocating equity and structuring this prior to these conversations, because it'll make your life so much easier from a fundraising perspective. And then I'll say, don't be married to your solution. And what I mean by this is, when founders are obsessed with problem solving, they'll come up with a solution. And if that solution turns out to not be what customers, what their initial hypothesis was around what customers wanted, they'll make the right decision on kind of how to pivot. If you're absolutely married to your solution, that's not a winning way to think, right? Do keep it simple. I've already talked about this. Share your deck ahead of time to orient the investor. Have a clear business plan. Understand and address your competition. This is really important, and I won't spend too much more time talking about this, but just know that we're always going to look at your competition. And I think the 2 mistakes a founder can make here are neglecting, intentionally not mentioning a competitor, or being unaware of a competitor. And either one is not a great look. And so just be crystal clear on the space that you're playing in, and make sure that you are speaking to this, because it's something we're going to have a question on, and we're going to want to know how you're thinking about competition. Know your business well, know your numbers, understand basic VC lingo, like I already said. Be clear on your ask, and then have solid governance. Have a board of directors, be taking minutes, just be thinking about who's keeping you accountable. And that's something that investors will care about as well. And I won't speak to any of these. This is my last slide. I would just say, feel free to screenshot this. These are some recommendations that I would have on podcasts and books that I think are really helpful. Some more geared to founders, some more geared to investors. But that is it. So I hope that's helpful. I don't know if I left time for Q&A, but on the next slide, I've got my email, and I would just say, feel more than free to reach out if you've got questions or would like to connect, or certainly to pitch your business. Would be more than happy to meet. We love Arizona. And again, thank you so much for having us involved today.
Thank you so much, Sydnie. I appreciate it. That was a great overview of what investors are looking for in business plans and pitches, and specifically in the Venture Madness application. So I'm going to go ahead and close the loop really quick on the application process, and then I think we'll have time for some Q&A here with Kate. So in regard to the application, oops, let me get my slide deck going here. For those of you who are early stage companies or growth companies in Arizona and the US, we are now accepting applications online through our website at investsouthwest.org. There are step-by-step instructions there, as well as a tutorial video on how to fill out that application. If you have applied in the past for our conference, we have a new platform that we're using in partnership with Arizona Commerce Authority this year. So if you've applied for AIC or other similar competitions through them, I'm sure you're familiar with the platform. But if not, I would encourage everyone in general to apply early. There is a page online, a form that you'll have to fill out, log back into the Startup Wind platform, and then complete our full application, which is slightly different from AIC. So there are really three components to our application. There is a Word document with several questions. It covers some of the items that Sydnie covered in her talk: traction, competition, your elevator pitch, and financials. We'll request to see your last 2 years of financials in 2020 and 2021. And then you'll upload that. And then we want to see your slide deck or your pitch deck. You'll upload that in a PDF. A video is not required for your application. However, if you have one, feel free to share it with us. So the applications are being reviewed by a volunteer group of what we call our selection panel. We have about 35 selection panel members, which are comprised of investors, a variety of investors, angel investors, VCs, high-level sponsors, and those who have are seasoned in the entrepreneurial world. They'll be reviewing those applications. So complete all of your information. You don't need to include any proprietary or confidential information, just brushstrokes. And the deadline for our applications this year is 3 p.m. Arizona time on June 3rd. So in terms of next steps, I get a lot of questions on, what happens after I apply. June 4th through the 24th, our selection panel will be reviewing and scoring all of the applications. They will determine 24 to 36 companies who will present at the hybrid event on October 6th and 7th. Following that, actually, we will notify you as to whether or not your application made the cut for Venture Madness. If it didn't make the cut, don't be alarmed. We'll be happy to provide you feedback if you'd like to see some feedback on your application. And it could just mean that it's a good learning experience to potentially apply for the next year or future years. So on August 5th or 6th, actually, I think I had that incorrectly on the previous slide. August 5th, we'll publicly announce the presenting companies, along with an orientation that is mandatory for the companies to go through. We have a kickoff reception, which includes networking with our key stakeholders, and then our mentor program and process begins. So for companies who are selected to present at the conference, they are required to go through 2 mandatory mentor sessions. These are 2 full-day sessions that are led by Tom Fulcher, who was he's with the Idea Gardener, and he's our mentor captain this year. And basically what he does is he puts together teams of investors, serious investors, entrepreneurs, and seasoned executives who are tailored to meet the needs of your company. They're industry experts, and what we have our companies do is give a sort of like a dry run of their pitch, and the mentors sit around the table in the room and they critique and they highlight the wonderful things about your companies and your presentation. So that's a really great program. I know you'll hear from our panel of previous Venture Madness winners later this afternoon, and they'll talk a little bit about that. Following that, we have the conference on the 6th and 7th. So I'm just going to kind of skip over this. This is a quick timeline of the required involvement if you are selected to present. And then if you want to learn more, you can apply online. Again, go to our website at investsouthwest.org. You can also sign up to receive our newsletter. And then we also have our social media outlets. So my email is right there. Feel free to reach out to me. You can find my information through our website as well. You can also connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn. So with that, I think I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Kate.
Hi, we have a few questions. You guys have time? Couple minutes? Okay. Number one, can you please talk about the funnel? How many companies typically apply, end up presenting, winners, what are the cash prices? And then the amount, is the amount funded diluted or non-diluted?
That's a great question. So typically we see 60 to 120 applications in any given year. It just depends on the year. So again, if you want to apply, I would encourage you to apply now so that you can complete all of your information. You would be surprised and amazed at the incomplete applications that we receive, and they are automatically left out for potentially presenting at our conference. The companies that are selected to present are anywhere from 24 to 36. Our selection panel chair, Ryan Edwards, is with Silicon Valley Bank. He works with our selection panel to put each of those companies in different industry categories to present at the conference. And then we typically have $60,000 in cash prizes. That's distributed based on how many categories we have. So we typically have 4 to 6 categories, and that is just a cash prize. There's no strings attached to that.
Great. And maybe this is for Sydnie or all of you. Who are the critical team members that should be involved in the application process? The board, original investors, of course, the key management team would be good. What's your advice on that?
This is specifically for Venture Madness, I'm assuming. I'll let you speak to that, Karen.
Sure. So our selection, yeah, and you can add to that. So our selection panel is comprised of VCs, accredited investors, angel investors, investment banks, again, some of our higher level sponsors. It is an invitation only panel, but we have about 35 panelists this year who really screen through and comb through those applications so we can have the best of the best present.
And let me add to that. I think the question was also who should be there presenting and who should be involved in the pitch. If I heard that correctly, maybe not, but I'll answer it anyway.
Okay.
Your CEO should be the presenter unless there is some extenuating circumstance, but you have to get that approved by us if someone other than the CEO is going to actually make the pitch that day. As far as your team obviously should contribute to your pitch and should be part of it. And we recommend that in your presentation deck, you include a slide about your advisors and other partners so that it's clear that you have subject matter expertise and you have support in your community or your industry. And that's covered very much in depth during the mentoring sessions. You'll get a lot of feedback on what should be in the deck and what shouldn't be.
Great. And then is the ask supposed to be included into the pitch? And if they wanted to amend an application that's already been sent, how would they go about doing that?
Okay, I'll answer that. So the ask cannot be in the pitch, and we'll cover that in orientation and once you're selected to apply at the conference. And then what was the second question again?
If they want to amend a pitch that's already been sent, how do they do that?
Okay, so yeah, we'll cover that in orientation. You can actually modify your application up until the application itself until June 3rd at 3 p.m. You'll see on the step-by-step instructions, do not hit that submit button on your application until it is final. Once it's final, it's final. Moving forward to the conference, there is a certain time frame where your pitch for the conference is final. We usually give up until a week prior to the conference to make any changes.
Fantastic. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, typically during the mentoring sessions, which I've harped on a couple times because they're super valuable. Typically between session 1 and session 2, we'll see changes in the presentation because the presenter will have gotten feedback from mentors on what worked well or what they might consider changing. And actually that's fantastic. That's exactly what we want to have happen because it tells us that the mentoring program is having an impact and making the pitches better before the final presentation. And I want to give one plug to Karen on something. For this year's application, since we moved to a different tool, we're using Startup Wind, Karen created a very simple Loom video. It walks you through step by step, click here, upload here. And I'll remind you, don't hit submit until you're really ready to submit. But watch her video.
Are the mentors available through the program and the judges similar? Are they the same people?
I'll answer that. So there are some that cross over, but they're typically a different group. So the judges are the VCs, sometimes out of state, sometimes in state, and the accredited investors here. And we try to keep it unique for the conference.
Wonderful. Well, this is an extremely informative session. Thank you so much, Karen, Sydnie, and Diana for being here. And if you want to learn more, we have another session coming up here in a few minutes, a half an hour or so, on actual winners that'll give you the step-by-step of their experience. So come right back. So thank you so much, ladies. Appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.